Midnight, the hour when the world holds its breath, and the veil between what is known and what is feared grows thin. In a forgotten manor, shrouded by centuries of ivy and silence, a single clock begins to chime. Its sound is not the gentle marking of time, but a hollow, metallic echo each, strike a reminder that something ancient still stirs within these walls. Shadows flicker across faded wallpaper, and somewhere, just beyond the reach of candlelight, a figure moves. The air is thick with secrets, and the only witness is the relentless ticking that refuses to die. They say the manor is cursed, that no one who enters after midnight leaves unchanged. Some whisper of a device, crafted by hands both brilliant and damned, a clockwork heart that beats with unnatural purpose. Others claim to have heard a voice, soft as a sigh, warning them to turn back before it's too late. But curiosity is a powerful thing, and the line between caution and obsession is perilously thin. Tonight, you and I will cross that line together. We will follow the echo of that midnight chime, tracing its origins through dust-choked corridors and forgotten histories. We will meet the man who built the clock and those who paid the price for his ambition. We will confront the question that has haunted generations. What is the true cost of forbidden knowledge? This is not just a story. It is a puzzle, a warning, and perhaps a curse of its own. If you have ever wondered what lies beneath the surface of history, if you are brave enough to listen for the ticking in the dark, then stay with me. The answers you seek may be more terrifying than you ever imagined. The clock is already counting down. The year is 1788, and Europe stands on the trembling edge of transformation. The age of enlightenment has swept across the continent like a fever, promising reason, progress, and the dazzling light of knowledge. In the salons of Paris and the lecture halls of Vienna, philosophers and scientists debate the nature of the universe, daring to imagine a world governed not by superstition, but by the laws of nature. The printing press churns out treatises and manifestos, and the air is thick with the scent of revolution, intellectual, political, and spiritual. Yet beneath this glittering surface, shadows linger. For every candle lit in the name of reason, there is a corner where darkness clings stubbornly, refusing to be banished. The old fears have not vanished. They have simply learned to wear new masks. In the countryside, far from the bustling cities and their promises of progress, the ancient rhythms of life persist. Superstitions are whispered over cradles and graves, and the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural remain perilously thin. It is in one such forgotten corner of the world that our story takes root. Nestled deep within a forest of twisted oaks and silent pines lies the village of Saint Antoine, a place untouched by the Enlightenment's golden glow. The villagers live as their ancestors did, tending to their fields and livestock, wary of outsiders and the strange ideas they bring. The church bell marks the hours, and the seasons dictate the rhythm of life. But there is another sound that sometimes drifts through the trees, a faint mechanical ticking, out of place in this world of mud and prayer. At the edge of the village, half swallowed by the encroaching forest, stands the manor. Once grand, it now slouches beneath the weight of neglect, its stone walls mottled with moss, and its windows clouded by years of dust. The locals call it La Maison du Minuet, the House of Midnight. They avoid its crumbling gates, muttering prayers as they pass, for they believe the manor is cursed. Some say it is haunted by the restless dead. Others claim it is a place where the laws of God and man no longer hold sway. The truth, as always, is more complicated. The manor's last inhabitant was a man named Lucien Valère, a figure both revered and reviled. To the villagers, he was a sorcerer, a dealer in forbidden arts. To the rare scholars who corresponded with him, he was a genius, a man ahead of his time, unafraid to peer into the abyss in search of answers. Valère was an alchemist, one of the last of his kind, practicing his craft in secret long after it had been condemned as heresy and folly. Alchemy, in the twilight of the 18th century, was a dying art. The world had moved on to chemistry, physics, and the rational sciences. But for men like Valère, the old ways still held power. Alchemy was not merely the pursuit of gold or immortality. It was a philosophy, a quest to unlock the hidden harmonies of the universe. It demanded secrecy, sacrifice, and a willingness to risk everything for a glimpse of the divine. Within the manor's shadowed halls, Valère toiled night after night, surrounded by ancient tomes, strange apparatus, and the ever-present ticking of his clockwork experiments. The villagers watched the windows for flickers of unnatural light, and sometimes, in the dead of night, they heard sounds that had no place in the waking world. Some claimed to see figures moving behind the curtains. Others swore they heard voices, speaking in tongues no living soul should know. The manor became a boundary, a place where the Enlightenment's promise of reason met the enduring power of fear. It was here, in this liminal space between progress and superstition, that Valère would create his final, most dangerous invention, a device that would outlast him and haunt the world long after the age of enlightenment had faded into memory. As the sun sets behind the tangled trees and the first stars prick the sky, the manor waits. Its secrets are patient, its shadows deep, and somewhere within, the clockwork heart begins to stir, counting down to a fate no one can yet imagine. Lucien Valère was born beneath an ill-omened sky, or so the villagers of Saint-Antoine would later claim. His mother, a midwife's daughter, died in childbirth, and his father, a minor nobleman with a taste for books and solitude, raised him in the shadowed halls of the manor. From the beginning, Lucien was marked as different. He spoke late, but when he did, his words were precise, almost unnervingly so. He spent his childhood wandering the woods, collecting stones and insects, and asking questions that unsettled the local priest. Why does the sun rise? What makes the heart beat? Where does the soul go when the body dies? As he grew, so did his hunger for knowledge. The manor's library, a relic of better days, became his sanctuary. He devoured treatises on mathematics, astronomy, and the natural sciences. But it was the forbidden texts, those hidden behind false panels and locked drawers, that truly captivated him. Alchemical manuscripts, their pages stained with cryptic symbols and the desperate hopes of centuries, promised secrets that the world had all but forgotten. Lucien read them by candlelight, his eyes burning with the fever of discovery. His father, proud but wary, sent him to Paris to study at the university. There, Lucien's brilliance shone, and so did his strangeness. He challenged his professors, dismissing their certainties and proposing theories that bordered on heresy. He argued that the mind could shape matter, that the soul was a force as real as gravity, and that the boundaries between life and death were not as fixed as most believed. Some admired his audacity. Others whispered that he was touched by madness. It was in Paris that Lucien first encountered the true cost of his obsession. He fell in with a circle of radical thinkers, philosophers, scientists, and occultists who encouraged his experiments. Together, they dabbled in mesmerism, dissected cadavers, and attempted to transmute base metals into gold. But as the years passed, Lucien's companions drifted away, frightened by the intensity of his pursuits. Rumors began to swirl that he had summoned spirits, that he had tried to reanimate the dead, that he had sacrificed more than animals in his quest for knowledge. Disgraced and increasingly isolated, Lucien returned to Saint-Antoine. The villagers watched his arrival with suspicion, crossing themselves as he passed. They remembered the strange lights that had once flickered in the manor's windows, and the stories their parents had told of his family's peculiar ways. Some said he was a genius, cursed by God for his pride. Others believed he was a madman, doomed to repeat the sins of those who had come before. Within the manor, Lucien threw himself into his work with a desperation that bordered on mania. He scoured the countryside for rare minerals and herbs, bribed traveling merchants for exotic components, and corresponded in secret with the last remaining alchemists of Europe. His letters, preserved in brittle parchment, reveal a mind both brilliant and tormented. "I have seen the edge of the abyss," he wrote to one confidant. "I have glimpsed the machinery that underlies the world, and I am compelled to understand it, no matter the cost." But what drove him? Was it the pure, unquenchable thirst for knowledge that has always haunted humanity's greatest minds? Or was it something darker, a need to prove himself, to conquer the limitations that had defined his life? Some say he was haunted by his mother's death, convinced that if he could only unlock the secrets of life and death, he could undo the tragedy that had shaped him. Others believe he was simply arrogant, convinced that he alone could succeed where so many had failed. The truth, as always, is elusive. Lucien Valère was a man of contradictions, compassionate yet ruthless, rational yet superstitious, visionary yet blind to the dangers of his own ambition. He cared little for the opinions of others, yet his loneliness gnawed at him. He sought to transcend human limits, yet he was all too human fragile, flawed, and desperate for meaning. In the end, it is this complexity that makes him so compelling. Was he a genius, punished for daring to dream too boldly? Or a villain, blinded by pride and willing to sacrifice anything for his own ends? The villagers of Saint Antoine never agreed. Some remembered him as a tragic figure, undone by forces beyond his control. Others cursed his name, blaming him for every misfortune that befell the village. But all agreed on one thing: Lucien Valère was not like other men. And it was this difference, this refusal to accept the world as it was, that would lead him to create the clockwork device that would become both his legacy and his curse. In the final years of his life, Lucien Valère became a ghost within his own manor. The villagers saw him less and less, and when they did, he was gaunt, his eyes sunken and wild, his hands stained with ink and strange powders. The manor itself seemed to pulse with a restless energy, as if the walls were straining to contain the feverish work unfolding within. It was during this time that the rumors began to multiply, stories of midnight deliveries, of flickering lights that danced behind shuttered windows, of a sound like 1,000 tiny gears whirring in the dark. The heart of these whispers was the device. No one outside the manor ever saw it in its entirety, but fragments of its legend seeped into the village like poison into a well. Some said it was a clock, others a music box, still others a machine for summoning spirits. The truth was stranger than any of these. In his journals, Lucien called it l'horloge de l'âme, the clock of the soul. The construction of the device was an act of obsession, a symphony of precision and madness. Lucien scavenged the countryside for rare metal silver mined from haunted hills, iron smelted in secret, gold filched from the chalices of ruined chapels. He bartered with gypsies for mercury and antimony, and sent coded letters to distant cities requesting substances whose names were known only to the initiated. The villagers watched as crates arrived under cover of darkness, their contents hidden from prying eyes. Inside the manor, Lucien worked by candlelight, his tools arrayed with surgical care. The device grew piece by piece, a labyrinth of gears, springs and levers, each component inscribed with alchemical symbols and cryptic runes. The main body was fashioned from blackened oak, polished to a mirror sheen, and inlaid with veins of silver that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. At its center was a crystal sphere, clear as water and cold as death, suspended in a delicate cage of gold filigree. Within the sphere, something moved in oily shadow, shifting and coiling as if alive. The device was not merely mechanical. Lucian's notes speak of rituals performed at the stroke of midnight, of incantations whispered in forgotten tongues, of blood his own mixed with mercury and sealed within the gears. He wrote of dreams in which the device spoke to him, promising revelations and warnings in equal measure. It is a vessel, he wrote, a bridge between worlds. Through it, the boundaries of flesh and spirit may be crossed. But to what end? The purpose of the clock of the soul was the subject of endless speculation. Some believed it was meant to grant immortality, to capture the essence of life and bind it within the crystal heart. Others whispered that it was a prison designed to contain something too terrible to be set free. A few, recalling the tragedies that haunted Lucian's family, wondered if it was an attempt to bring back the dead. Whatever its purpose, the device radiated a sense of dread. Those few who glimpsed its servants, tradesmen, a curious priest spoke of a feeling of vertigo, as if the world tilted around the machine. The ticking was relentless, a sound that burrowed into the mind and refused to be silenced. Some claimed to hear voices, faint and pleading, woven into the rhythm of the gears. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the activity in the manor ceased. The windows went dark, the deliveries stopped, and Lucien Valère vanished. The villagers waited, half expecting him to reappear, but weeks passed with no sign. Eventually, a group of men, emboldened by drink and fear, forced their way into the manor. They found the house in disarray, papers scattered, candles burned to stubs, the air thick with the scent of oil and something sweeter, almost metallic. In the center of Lucien's study, upon a table draped in black velvet, sat the device. It was wound and ticking, the crystal sphere glowing with a sickly light. The men stared, transfixed, until one Jean-Baptiste, the blacksmith, reached out to touch it. The moment his fingers brushed the gold filigree, the ticking stopped. The room seemed to contract, the shadows deepening, and a cold wind swept through the manor, extinguishing every candle. Jean-Baptiste collapsed, his body racked by convulsions. When he finally stilled, his eyes were wide open, fixed on the device, his lips frozen in a silent scream. The others fled, dragging his body with them, but nothing could erase the horror of what they had witnessed. The blacksmith was buried at the edge of the village, his grave left unmarked. The device remained in the manor, untouched, its ticking silent, but its presence undeniable. From that night on, the villagers avoided the manor entirely. They spoke of a curse, of a shadow that lingered in the woods, of a clock that sometimes could be heard ticking in the dead of night. Lucien Valère was never seen again. Some said he had been claimed by his own creation, others that he had crossed into another world, but all agreed on one thing: the clockwork device was not meant for mortal hands. Its birth was the beginning of a curse that would echo through history, waiting for the next soul, brave or foolish enough to wind its gears. The manor stood silent for years after Lucien Valère's disappearance, its windows blind, its doors sealed by fear and superstition. Yet the world beyond Saint Antoine did not forget. Whispers of the alchemist's clockwork marvel now called. Simply the curse began to seep into the wider world, carried by rumor, curiosity, and the irresistible allure of the forbiddens. The device, it seemed, was not content to gather dust in the shadows. It was destined to move, to haunt, to claim. The first to seek it out was a scholar from Lyon, a man named Étienne Morel. In 1802, drawn by tales of Valère's genius, Morel bribed a villager to guide him to the manor. He found the device exactly as it had been left, silent, cold, and yet somehow watchful. Morel, a rationalist to his core, scoffed at the stories of curses and spirits. He believed in science, in the power of reason to dispel the darkness. He brought the device back to his study, determined to unlock its secrets. Within weeks, Morel's letters grew erratic. He wrote of sleepless nights, of dreams filled with ticking and shadows, of a sense that he was being watched. His colleagues dismissed his fears as the product of overwork, but then the accidents began. A fire broke out in his laboratory, destroying years of research. His wife fell ill with a mysterious fever. Morel himself was found dead at his desk, his hand frozen in the act of winding the device. The official cause was heart failure, but those who saw his face spoke of a look of terror that could not be explained. The device vanished from public view, only to resurface decades later in the hands of a Prussian collector, Baron von Eltz. The Baron was a man of wealth and eccentric tastes, known for his collection of oddities and relics. He displayed the Clockwork device in a glass case, boasting of its origins and the legends that clung to it. Guests at his estate reported strange occurrences: clocks stopping at midnight, mirrors clouding with frost, the sound of distant ticking echoing through empty halls. One night, the Baron's youngest daughter was found wandering the corridors, her eyes glazed, murmuring in a language no one recognized. The Baron sent the device away the next morning, but his fortunes never recovered. He died penniless, his estate sold off piece by piece. As the years passed, the device changed hands again and again, each new owner drawn by a different hunger, curiosity, greed, the hope of power, or immortality. Each time, misfortune followed. In 1867, it appeared in London in the possession of a spiritualist named Madame Rowena. She claimed the device was a conduit to the other side, a tool for communing with the dead. Her seances became infamous, attended by the desperate and the curious alike. But the messages she channeled grew darker, more insistent, until one night she collapsed mid-ritual, blood streaming from her ears. Her final words, scrawled in a trembling hand, were a warning. It is not a bridge, but a cage. Skeptics, of course, offered rational explanations. They spoke of coincidence, of the power of suggestion, of the human mind's tendency to find patterns in chaos. They pointed to the stress of obsession, the dangers of isolation, the madness that can come from staring too long into the abyss. But for every skeptic, there was a believer, someone who had heard the ticking in the night, who had seen the shadows move, who knew in their bones that the device was more than mere machinery. A device's infamy grew. It became a legend, a cautionary tale whispered in the halls of universities and the back rooms of occult societies. Some sought to destroy it, but each attempt ended in failure or tragedy. In 1912, a fire consumed the home of a Parisian antiquarian who claimed to have dismantled the device. Nothing remained but ash and the faint outline of gears burned into the floorboards. In 1939, as war swept across Europe, the device was rumored to have been smuggled out of Berlin by a fleeing aristocrat. His ship vanished in a storm, and for years the device was presumed lost at sea. But legends, like curses, are hard to kill. In the decades that followed, stories surfaced from all corners of the world. A collector in Buenos Aires, who locked the device in a vault, only to be found dead, his face contorted in terror. A museum curator in Prague, who displayed it as a curiosity, until a string of inexplicable accidents forced the exhibit to close. Each story ended the same way, with loss, with fear, with the sense that something had been unleashed that could not be contained. And always the same details returned. The relentless ticking, sometimes audible, sometimes only felt a pressure. Behind the eyes, a pulse in the bones. The sense of being watched, of shadows gathering at the edge of vision. The dreams filled with gears and darkness, with voices that whispered secrets and threats. Some who encountered the device became obsessed, unable to let it go. Others fled, abandoning their homes, their lives, anything to escape its influence. Yet the device always found a way back into the world, as if it were searching for something or someone. Some believed it was seeking a soul strong enough to master it. Others that it was simply hungry, feeding on fear and suffering. The rationalists continued to scoff, but even they could not explain the pattern of misfortune, the trail of broken lives and shattered minds. By the dawn of the 21st century, the device had become a myth, its existence doubted by all, but the most dedicated seekers. But the stories persisted, passed down in whispers and warnings. And somewhere, in a forgotten archive or a private collection, the clockwork heart still ticked, waiting for the next hand to wind its gears. What would you do if you found it? Would you dare to test the boundary between reason and terror, to risk everything for a glimpse of the forbiddance? Or would you turn away, leaving the curse to haunt another generation? The answer, perhaps, is not as simple as it seems. For some doors, once opened, can never be closed. And some clocks, once wound, will never stop ticking. In the present day, the legend of the alchemist's clockwork curse is little more than a footnote in the annals of the strange and unexplained, a curiosity for late-night radio, a ghost story for the internet age. Yet for some, the line between myth and history is not so easily drawn. Among these is Dr. Elise Marchand, a historian whose life has become inextricably bound to the device's shadow. Elise's obsession began, as so many do, with a single innocuous discovery. While cataloging the estate of a recently deceased antiquarian in Paris, she stumbled upon a battered leather journal, its pages brittle with age and stained with ink. The handwriting was elegant, looping, and unmistakably old-fashioned. The first entry was dated 1788, the name at the bottom, Lucien Valère. At first, Elise dismissed it as a forgery, another clever fabrication meant to entice collectors. But, as she read, the details grew too precise, too intimate to be the work of a modern hand. The journal spoke of alchemical experiments, of a device that could bridge the chasm between flesh and spirit, of dreams haunted by the relentless ticking of unseen gears. The final pages ended abruptly, the ink smeared as if by a trembling hand. For most, this would have been a curiosity, a story to share over drinks. But for Elise, it was a spark. She had always been drawn to the margins of history, to the stories that refused to fit neatly into the official record. The more she read, the more she felt the pull of the mystery. Who was Lucien Valère, really? What had become of his infamous device? And why did so many who encountered it meet such terrible ends? Her search began in libraries and archives, sifting through yellowed letters and forgotten news clippings. She traced the device's path from Saint Antoine to Lyon, from Berlin to Buenos Aires, piecing together a mosaic of tragedy and obsession. Each new discovery brought her closer to the heart of the legend and deeper into its darkness. Elise found herself haunted by the same patterns that had plagued the device's previous owners. She began to dream of ticking clocks, of shadowed figures moving just beyond the edge of sight. Her friends noticed the change in her, how she grew withdrawn, how her eyes darted to the corners of rooms as if expecting to see something lurking there. She laughed it off, blaming the stress of research, but inside, she felt the weight of the curse pressing down on her. The deeper she dug, the more resistance she encountered. Archivists grew cagey when she mentioned the device, their faces closing off as if she had uttered a forbidden word. Letters she sent to private collectors went unanswered, or returned with terse warnings to let sleeping dogs lie. Even her university superiors began to question her focus, urging her to return to more conventional topics. But Elise could not let go. The story had its hooks in her, and she was determined to see it through. Her breakthrough came in the form of a letter, hidden in the false bottom of a trunk purchased at auction. The letter was addressed to Etienne Morel, the ill-fated scholar from Lyon, and was signed by none other than Lucien Valère. In it, Valère described the final days before his disappearance, the rituals, the sacrifices, the sense that he was being watched by something he could not name. "The device is not what I intended," he wrote. "It is alive in its way. It hungers. I fear what it will become if left unchecked." The letter included a crude map marking the location of a hidden compartment within the manor at Saint Antoine. Elise's heart pounded as she realized what this meant, the possibility that the device, or at least some part of it, might still be there, waiting to be found. She booked a flight to France, her mind racing with anticipation and dread. The village of Saint Antoine had changed little in the centuries since Valère's time. The manor, though crumbling, still stood at the edge of the forest, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Elise felt the weight of history pressing down on her as she crossed the threshold, flashlight in hand, the air thick with dust and the scent of decay. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of shadows and silence. Elise moved from room to room, her footsteps echoing on warped floorboards. In the study, she found remnants of Valère's life, books with spines cracked by age, glass vials clouded with residue, a portrait of a man whose eyes seemed to follow her wherever she went. She followed the map to a hidden panel behind the fireplace, her hands trembling as she pried it open. Inside the compartment, she found a small, velvet-lined box. Her breath caught as she opened it, revealing a collection of gears, springs, and a single, flawless crystal sphere. The pieces were cold to the touch, and as she held them, she felt a faint vibration, a pulse almost, as if the device were trying to wake. Elise spent weeks in the manor, piecing together the fragments of Valère's creation. She pored over his journals, deciphering the alchemical symbols and cryptic instructions. The more she learned, the more she felt the device's presence, growing stronger. The ticking returned, first faint, then insistent, echoing through the empty halls. She began to see shadows moving in the corners of her vision, to hear whispers in the dead of night. Her skepticism began to erode. Was it possible that the device truly was cursed? Or was she simply succumbing to the same madness that had claimed so many before her? She documented everything, determined to maintain a scientist's detachment, but the line between observer and participant grew ever thinner. One night, as she worked by candlelight, Elise caught her reflection in a cracked mirror. Her eyes were hollow, her face drawn. She realized she had not slept in days, that she was speaking aloud to herself, answering questions no one had asked. The device sat on the table before her, its gears gleaming in the flickering light. She reached out, her hand trembling, and for a moment she felt the urge to wind it, to see what would happen if she gave in to the temptation that had destroyed so many before her. She stopped herself, heart pounding. She thought of Morel, of Madame Rowena, of all those who had fallen under the device's spell. Was she any different? Or was she simply the next link in a chain of obsession and ruin? And now, I must ask you, if you were in Elise's place, would you dare to keep searching? Would you risk your sanity, your very soul, for the promise of forbidden knowledge? Or would you turn away, leaving the mystery unsolved, the curse unbroken? Tell me, what would you do, standing at the edge of the abyss, with the ticking of a clock echoing in your ears? For Elise, the investigation is far from over. The device's secrets remain tantalizingly out of reach, its curse as potent as ever. But the story is not hers alone. It belongs to all who are drawn to the shadows, to the questions that have no easy answers, to the mysteries that refuse to die. The clock is still ticking, and the next chapter is waiting to be written. Urquhart still ticked, waiting for the next hand to wind its gears. What would you do if you found it? Would you dare to test the boundary between reason and terror? To risk everything for a glimpse of the forbiddance? Or would you turn away, leaving the curse to haunt another generation? The answer, perhaps, is not as simple as it seems. For some doors, once opened, can never be closed. And some clocks, once wound, will never stop ticking. Elise's days and nights in the manor blurred together. Time measured not by the sun, but by the relentless, phantom ticking that seemed to pulse from the very walls. She became a creature of shadows, her world shrinking to the circle of candlelight. On her desk, the labyrinth of Valaire's journals and the cold, enigmatic pieces of the device. The outside world faded emails unanswered, calls ignored, her life in Paris receding like a half-remembered dream. All that mattered was the mystery, the promise of revelation, the hope that she might finally understand what had driven Lucien Valliere to the edge of madness. The breakthrough came in the dead of night, as so many do. Elise was poring over a final brittle sheaf of notes, her eyes gritty with exhaustion, when she noticed a pattern in the alchemist's writing, a sequence of symbols that repeated, always in the margins, always near passages describing the device's operation. She cross-referenced them with the diagrams she had painstakingly reconstructed, and suddenly the pieces fell into place. The device was not merely a clock, nor a music box, nor a conduit to the dead. It was a mirror, a mechanism designed to reflect and amplify the deepest fears and desires of those who came near it. Valaire's final message, hidden in a cipher, only a mind as fevered as his could devise, was a warning and a confession. The device is a vessel for the soul's shadow, he wrote, his script trembling with desperation. It does not create evil, nor summon spirits. It reveals what is already within. The curse is not in the gears or the crystal, but in the heart of the one who winds it. Beware, for it will show you the face you most fear to see your own, stripped of all illusion. Elise felt a chill crawl up her spine as she read those words. She thought of the device's victims, Morel, Rowena, the Baron's daughter, and saw them anew, not as hapless prey of a supernatural force, but as people undone by their own obsessions, their own secrets. The device had not killed them. It had simply opened a door they had spent their lives trying to keep shut. But the revelation did not bring relief. If anything, it deepened the horror. For what could be more terrifying than the knowledge that the true curse was not some external malice, but the darkness each person carried within? Elise looked at the device, its crystal heart gleaming in the candlelight, and felt it watching her, waiting for her to make a choice. She remembered the dreams that had plagued her, the ticking, the shadows, the sense of being hunted by something she could not see. She realized, with a sickening clarity, that the device had been working on her all along, feeding on her doubts, her fears, her relentless need to know. It had shown her the abyss, and she had stared into it, hoping to find answers, only to find herself reflected back, fractured and raw. The temptation to wind the device, to see what final truth it might reveal, was almost overwhelming. Elise's hands shook as she hovered over the mechanism, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She thought of Valliere, alone in his manor, driven to the brink by the same hunger that now gnawed at her. She thought of all those who had come before, each believing they could master the device, each destroyed by the truths it forced them to confront. In that moment, Elise understood the true price of forbidden knowledge. It was not death, nor madness, nor even the loss of one's soul. It was the shattering of certainty, the realization that the greatest mysteries are not out there, in the world, but within ourselves. The device was a curse because it made that truth inescapable, undeniable, and utterly devastating. She stepped back from the table, tears streaming down her face, her body racked by a grief she could not name. She wanted to destroy the device, to end the cycle of obsession and ruin, but she knew it would be futile. The curse was not in the object, but in the longing that drew people to it, a longing to know, to control, to transcend the limits of flesh and mind. As dawn crept through the broken windows, Elise made her decision. She would not wind the device. She would not become another name in its long, tragic history. Instead, she would leave the manor, sealing the device away, and carry the burden of knowledge with her. She would tell the story, not as a warning against the supernatural, but as a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition, of the shadows that lurk in every human heart. But as she turned to go, a final chilling thought struck her. What if the curse was not just psychological? What if, in some unfathomable way, the device had become a vessel for all the darkness it had revealed, a nexus of fear and suffering that could never truly be destroyed? What if, by telling the story, she was only ensuring that the curse would live on, passed from one curious soul to the next, forever echoing through history? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as Elise stepped into the morning light. The manor was silent, the device dormant, but somewhere, deep within its gears, a single, almost imperceptible tick sounded a promise that the story was not yet over. And so, the legend endures. Was the curse real, or merely a contagion of the mind, spreading from one seeker to another, feeding on their fears and desires? Or was it something more, something that defied explanation, waiting for the next hand to wind its heart? The answer, as always, lies not in the device, but in those who dare to seek it. And perhaps, in the end, that is the most terrifying truth of all. Elise Marchand left Saint Antoine a changed woman. The journey home was a blur of fields and forests passing by in a haze, the world outside the train window feeling distant and unreal. She carried no physical scars, but the weight of what she had uncovered pressed on her like a second skin. The device, sealed in its velvet-lined box, remained hidden in the manor's secret compartment, untouched and for now silent. But the true legacy of the Clockwork curse was not so easily contained. In the weeks that followed, Elise tried to return to her old life. She resumed her lectures, answered emails, and met friends for coffee, but everything felt hollow, as if she were moving through a world made of glass. She found herself glancing at clocks, flinching at the sound of ticking, her dreams still haunted by the echo of gears turning in the dark. The story she had uncovered gnawed at her, demanding to be told, but every attempt to write it down left her hands trembling, her thoughts scattering like frightened birds. The university, sensing her distraction, quietly reassigned her to less demanding work. Colleagues whispered about her obsession, some with pity, others with unease. A few, drawn by the gravity of her experience, pressed her for details, hoping for a glimpse of the forbiddens. Elise saw the hunger in their eyes, the same hunger that had driven her, and Valère, and all the others who had come before. She recoiled from it, recognizing the first stirrings of the curse in their curiosity. Word of her research spread, and soon strangers began to reach out, historians, collectors, even self-proclaimed mediums. Some offered money, others warnings. A handful sent letters filled with frantic scrawls, claiming to have seen the device. In their dreams, to have heard its ticking in the quiet hours before dawn. Elise read these messages with a growing sense of dread, realizing that the curse was not just a relic of the past, but a living thing adapting, evolving, seeking new hosts. Meanwhile, the village of Saint Antoine did what it had always done. In the face of darkness, it closed ranks, burying the truth beneath layers of silence and superstition. The manor was boarded up, its gates chained, the path to its door overgrown with brambles. The villagers spoke of Elise in hushed tones, some calling her brave, others a fool. A few, remembering the tragedies of the past, left offerings at the edge of the forest, candles, coins, sprigs of rosemary, hoping to appease whatever restless spirit lingered in the shadows. But the curse was not so easily appeased. Those who had come into contact with the device, even briefly, found their lives subtly altered. The blacksmith's descendants, still living on the outskirts of the village, spoke of a family tendency toward nightmares and sudden, inexplicable illnesses. In Lyon, the Morel family line dwindled, each generation marked by a streak of brilliance and madness. The Baron's estate in Prussia fell into ruin, its halls echoing with the footsteps of unseen guests. Madame Rowena's followers scattered, some turning to other forms of spiritualism, others abandoning the occult altogether, haunted by memories they could not explain. For Elise, the greatest horror was not the device itself, but the knowledge that the cycle would never truly end. The story would be told and retold, each time drawing new seekers into its web. Some would dismiss it as a myth, a cautionary tale for the credulous. Others would be unable to resist the lure of the unknown, convinced that they could succeed where so many had failed. The curse, she realized, was not a single event, but a pattern, a shadow that stretched across generations, feeding on the very human desire to know, to possess, to conquer the mysteries that lie just beyond reach. And yet there was empathy, too, woven through the horror. Elise understood now what had driven Valère and Morel and all the others. She saw their longing, their loneliness, their desperate hope that the device might offer answers to questions too painful to ask aloud. She mourned for them, and for herself, and for all those who would come after, drawn by the promise of revelation and undone by the cost. In the end, the legacy of the Clockwork curse was not just a trail of tragedy, but a mirror held up to the human soul. It revealed the price of obsession, the danger of unchecked ambition, and the terrible beauty of our longing to pierce the veil of the unknown. The device remained hidden, its ticking silenced for now. But the story endured, waiting for the next curious mind, the next restless heart, the next soul willing to risk everything for a glimpse of the forbiddens. And somewhere, in the quiet hours before dawn, if you listen closely, you might still hear it, the faint, relentless ticking of a curse that refuses to die. What is it that draws us to the edge of the unknown, even when we sense the danger waiting there? Is it simple curiosity, or something deeper, a hunger to transcend the limits of our own existence, to touch the mysteries that lie just beyond the reach of reason? The story of the alchemist's clockwork curse is, at its heart, a meditation on the price of knowledge and the shadows cast by ambition. Lucien Valère's journey was not unique. Across history, countless men and women have risked everything in pursuit of forbidden truths. Some have been celebrated as visionaries, others condemned as heretics or madmen. But all have faced the same question. How much are you willing to sacrifice for a glimpse behind the curtain? Is the pursuit of knowledge a noble calling or a dangerous temptation that leads only to ruin? The device itself, whether you believe it to be a supernatural artifact or a mirror for the mind's darkest corners, forces us to confront the boundaries of what we can and should know. It asks us to consider whether some mysteries are best left unsolved, some doors left unopened. And yet, the very act of telling the story, of listening to its echoes, proves that the urge to seek, to question, to risk, is woven into the fabric of who we are. So I ask you, if you stood in Elise's place with the device before you and the weight of history pressing down, what would you do? Would you wind the gears, daring to face whatever truth or terror awaited? Or would you turn away, content to let the past remain buried, the curse unbroken? Is there a line you would not cross, a price you would not pay, or does the promise of revelation outweigh the fear of consequence? Perhaps you have your own stories, moments, when curiosity led you somewhere you never expected, when the search for answers brought more questions, or when you glimpsed something in yourself you could not explain. If you're brave enough, share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Do you believe the curse was real, Or was it all in the mind? Is there such a thing as knowledge too dangerous to pursue? In the end, the story of the Clockwork Curse is not just about the past, but about all of us, our hopes, our fears, our endless, restless longing to know. The ticking may have faded, but the questions remain. And perhaps that is the true legacy of Forbidden's knowledge. Not the answers we find, but the courage it takes to keep asking. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows of history, where the line between fact and legend blurs, and every answer only leads to deeper questions. If you found yourself haunted by the tale of the alchemist's clockwork curse, you're not alone. These stories linger for a reason. They speak to something restless within us all, a part of us that can't help but listen for the faint ticking in the dark. If you're drawn to mysteries that refuse to die, to the secrets that history tries to bury, I invite you to subscribe and become part of this community of seekers. Here, we don't just tell stories, we unravel them together, piece by piece, always searching for the truth hidden beneath the surface. Your thoughts, your theories, your own experiences with the unexplained are what make this channel more than just a collection of tales. So don't be shy, share your voice in the comments, and let's keep the conversation alive. And if you're hungry for more, don't worry, the next story is already waiting in the wings. From haunted manuscripts to vanished cults, from unsolved crimes to the darkest corners of the human mind, there's always another secret to uncover, another shadow to chase. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. But before you go, ask yourself, did you hear it? That faint, relentless ticking echoing through the centuries? The clock is still ticking. Will you be the next to hear it? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and remember, some mysteries are never truly silent.